She looked me dead in the eye, in front of the whole room, and said I leeched off our mother, at Mom's will reading no less. But what she didn't expect was that I had receipts, 9 years worth of them, rent payments, tuition help, late-night wire transfers, all from me to her. Hi, I'm Jenna, and for most of my life I was the quiet sister, the one they forgot to thank and sometimes forgot altogether. But that day, I didn't stay quiet. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way, I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water, and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. They misspelled my name again. Gina. Printed in silver script on thick cardstock, like the extra weight of the paper could mask the insult. It caught the light when I tilted it. The loop of the J curling delicately across the page, like a lie dressed in pearls. I ran my finger over it, not to feel the texture, but to remind myself it was real. They had sent it. Formal, cold, and late. It wasn't the first time. When I turned 30, Elaine told a mutual friend at a dinner party that I was the fallback child. She said it lightly with a laugh that tried to pass it off as a joke. I didn't react then. I just sipped my wine and smiled. But that label stuck, quietly embedding itself in moments like this. I set the envelope down on the counter next to a half-eaten slice of cold pizza. The crust had gone stiff. The box had been there since the night before, when I told myself I'd clean the kitchen after I finished grading papers. I hadn't finished. The blinds were tilted halfway open, letting in the kind of late-afternoon light that made dust look poetic. It was a nice lie, that kind of light, like it could turn chipped mugs into heirlooms and unpaid bills into vintage clutter. I stared at the invitation again. The envelope bore the family's preferred law firm crest in soft gray foil. Inside, the actual card read, "You are cordially invited to the reading of Corinne Walker's Last Will and Testament. Saturday, October 7th, 10 a.m., Walker and Lynn Law Offices. Cordially." I reached for my chipped coffee mug still half full of reheated grounds. The mail had come late. Our usual carrier was on medical leave, and the temporary one seemed to drop everything by accident, judging by the bent corners of my electric bill. I took a sip and winced. Lukewarm. I didn't bother reheating it again. My laptop dinged. I didn't need to check to know what it was. The rent reminder. First of the month looming, same as always. I walked over to it anyway, jiggled the trackpad, and stared at the alert until it faded. Then I clicked open a folder on my desktop labeled Support Records, Elaine. Inside were 9 PDFs, each named by year. Bank transfers, rent supplements, even one signed co-signature on her old car lease. I scrolled through them like flipping pages in a book no one else would read. There was a time when I thought these things would bring us closer, when I believed that helping family meant something lasting. That support was a seed that eventually bore fruit. Not gratitude necessarily, but at least decency. But that was before Elaine learned to shine without shadows. And I was the shadow. The phone rang. I stared at it a moment before picking up. Voicemail. Dad. His voice came through the speaker like it always did. Low, formal, as if even talking to me required restraint. "Hi, Jenna. I know you got the invitation. It would be good if you came. Please don't bring up the past. Let's keep it simple. Elaine's been under a lot of stress." Click. No. How are you? No. Sorry for your loss. Just an ask not to be a problem. I let the phone drop onto the couch and leaned against the armrest. I could still hear the message playing in my head, like it was stuck on repeat. I hadn't even known Mom was in the hospital until after her second night. Dylan had texted me awkwardly, "Hey, don't freak out, but Mom's been admitted. Elaine said she didn't want to worry you until they knew more." Didn't want to worry me? I snorted softly. Elaine always assumed that concern was a luxury I couldn't afford. Maybe she was right. Back then, I had been teaching night classes, juggling side gigs, and covering part of Elaine's rent. when she lost that marketing job in Tampa. My eyes drifted to the window. A squirrel darted across the fire escape with something shiny in its mouth, probably a candy wrapper. Even scavengers found treasure sometimes. I walked back to the counter and picked up the invitation again, turned it over. Backside blank. I flipped it open one last time and let the embossed letters stare at me, daring me to react. I didn't cry, I didn't tear it up, I didn't text Dylan or call Julian, even though both crossed my mind. I just stood there in the quiet, hearing nothing but the fridge hum and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my weight. Then I folded the card and placed it beside my coffee mug. I finished the pizza. It was cold and dry, but it filled my mouth with something other than silence. When the last bite was gone, I wiped my fingers on a napkin and said, almost like it wasn't me talking, "Let them see me." I stood up, rinsed the plate, and turned toward the closet. Pulled out the navy blue dress I'd worn to Mom's memorial, the same one with the fraying thread at the collar and a loose hem I never got around to fixing. I laid it on the bed, smoothed the fabric, plugged in the iron, and waited for it to heat. Outside, the sky had started to shift, edging from gold to gray, like even the weather wasn't sure how to feel. The iron hissed softly as it touched the fabric. The heat rose in a small cloud, and I pressed it down carefully, like I was sealing something in, or maybe steaming something out. Some garments don't need to look new. They just need to hold their shape long enough to get you through the room. I didn't know what they expected of me, but I knew what I expected of myself, and I wasn't going to disappear this time. They sat me by the coat rack next to the elevator chime. Every time someone arrived late or stepped out to take a call, the soft ding echoed above my head like punctuation to a sentence I hadn't finished. Apparently, even in grief, the seating chart speaks. The building was one of those glass and steel renovations that tried to look expensive without committing to comfort. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemons and photocopier toner. On the reception desk was a tray of citrus water that no one seemed brave enough to drink. I signed my name, Jenna Walker, in slow, even strokes. The young receptionist didn't look up. Across the lobby, I spotted Elaine almost immediately. She was in deep conversation with a man in a crisp navy suit, her hands fluttering in front of her like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. Her blazer was a cream color, cinched at the waist, paired with soft rose lipstick and that hairstyle she copied from a morning anchorwoman. Polished, practiced. When her eyes landed on me, she paused just long enough to let recognition show. Then she smiled. Too wide. Too fast. "Didn't think you'd come," she said, walking over with the kind of grace you only wear when you believe the room is already yours. I shrugged. Surprise. She gave a quick laugh, all teeth. "Well, you look prepared." Her gaze flicked to my navy dress, the same one from the memorial, the same one she complimented back then and later described to a friend as serviceable. She didn't hug me. Didn't even offer a handshake. Just turned on her heel and said, "They're assigning seats," as if she wasn't the one who arranged them. A paralegal appeared at my side and pointed toward a small table near the back wall. It wasn't in the main row with the leather chairs or the angled view of the front monitor. My name was printed on a thin card tucked beside a basket of cough drops and a mini bottle of hand sanitizer. Across from me sat Dylan, hunched and scrolling through his phone like he hoped the floor would open up. Dad wasn't in sight yet. I took my seat, folded my hands in my lap, and looked around. Elaine was already seated toward the front beside Dad, who leaned slightly away from her, his hands clasped tightly on his knees. Bernard Fox stood near the podium, reviewing a binder that looked heavy enough to anchor a ship. His tie was dark red, his blazer perfectly pressed. He had the presence of someone who'd walked people through grief 100 times and never once cried with them. "Thank you all for coming," Bernard began, tapping the folder lightly. "I know this is not an easy day, but your mother, Corinne Walker, was a woman who believed in structure, and her final wishes reflect that." I let the words wash over me without letting them sink in. The The last time I gave Elaine money, it was 2019. She'd called me late, voice shaking, mascara smeared, crying about a missed rent payment. I wired $2,500 the next morning. The note on the transaction read, "Don't lose your apartment again." She never thanked me, not properly. A month later, she posted a photo of her at a vineyard with the caption, "Self-Care Weekend." Now, sitting here in this sleek room, I wondered if anyone else even remembered that I had shown up back then, too. Bernard's voice continued, steady and impersonal. The estate includes real property, a vehicle, investment assets, and several personal effects. We'll walk through the full reading in phases. When he read Elaine's name aloud, noting her as the primary beneficiary of the family home, she didn't blink, not a twitch, just crossed her legs and accepted it like she was receiving what had been preordained. Dylan was next. The car, Mom's Lexus, and a modest brokerage account, plus a necklace she used to wear on holidays. Dylan looked mildly surprised, then folded his paper and gave a quiet nod. Then silence. No mention of me. No acknowledgement, no brooch, no letter, not even the earrings I helped pick out for her retirement party. I waited. Nothing. During the first break, they brought in a tray of pastries and weak coffee. I didn't move. Elaine leaned back in her chair, turned toward me, and with a smile so tight it could snap, said, "You sure made a career out of leeching off Mom." It didn't land like a slap. It landed like an expectation, like she thought I'd take it, again. I didn't. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "Say it louder, Elaine. Or are you only brave when nobody's watching?" She flinched just slightly and then turned back toward the coffee table. Dylan coughed but didn't speak. Dad pretended to be checking something on his phone. I sat back in my chair, adjusting the hem of my dress. The thread near the seam had loosened again. I tucked it under with one finger and reached down to the tote bag at my feet. My hand found the corner of the folder I had brought. 9 years' worth of receipts, bank transfers, emails, voicemails, color-coded tabs. There's a saying I once heard, something like, "Time exposes truth, but silence preserves dignity." I had stayed silent for years, preserving, swallowing, stepping aside. But silence, I was beginning to realize, had cost me more than words ever could, and I was done paying. For 9 years, I paid her rent, I said. That's the kind of leech I am. The words hung in the air like steam rising off a cup no one dared to sip from. I hadn't raised my voice. I didn't have to. Just the statement, plain and flat, was enough to shift the temperature in the room. Bernard looked up from his notes. His expression didn't change, still composed, still lawyerly, but his fingers paused briefly over the folder clasp. Even he felt it. I reached into my tote and pulled out the folder, worn along the corners with tabs in blue, yellow, and green. It made a soft slap against the polished table when I set it down. Then I opened it and began sliding the documents toward him, one at a time. May 2016, $1,050. Elaine's rent in Charlotte. She had just lost her job at the branding agency. Bernard accepted the page without a word. December 2017, $600 utility reimbursement. She was 2 months behind on electricity and heat. Another page. Spring 2018. She enrolled in an online certification program. I paid the enrollment fee because she said she needed it to be taken seriously again. I paused. She emailed me that year. Want to read that one, Bernard? He took the page I slid across and adjusted his reading glasses. Subject line, "Thank you." Sent June 12, 2018, 2:08 a.m. He began. Elaine shifted in her chair. He cleared his throat and continued. "If you hadn't helped, I would have been sleeping in my car. I mean it. I'm trying to get my life together. You're the only person who doesn't throw that in my face. Someday, I'll be able to return the favor. I love you." The room was quiet enough to hear the faint hiss of the air conditioning. Even the building seemed to be holding its breath. Elaine let out a dry laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to reclaim control. That was personal, she said, crossing her arms. We all help each other. She wanted to do those things. She was between jobs. She was bored. Bored. That word slid into me like a dull blade. I turned to Dylan. He looked away, then back at me. You remember, I said, not as a question. He swallowed. His voice was low. I remember. Elaine looked at him, wide-eyed. You're taking her side now? He didn't answer. I sat straighter in my chair, smoothed the crease on my dress, and pushed one more document forward. November 2019, I said. She called me from a rest stop near Atlanta. Her car had broken down. She had $23 in her account. I wired her $300 and paid for the tow. Bernard's voice was a little softer now. There's a message attached to this one. He read, I owe you my life, Jenna. I'll make it up to you one day. I swear. Elaine said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the corner of the table. Russell finally looked at me. Really looked. I don't know if it was shock, guilt, or something else entirely. But he didn't say a word, just folded his hands a little tighter. Funny thing about silence, it can say everything and nothing all at once. In that moment, it said what they hadn't said for years. They didn't know. Or worse, they did, and let it happen anyway. I don't think I expected applause. I didn't want a medal or a revised inheritance. I just wanted the truth in the room. I wanted to see what they looked like when they couldn't dodge it. Elaine tried to recover, tilting her head slightly like she'd remembered she was supposed to act composed. Well, I guess you've kept receipts, she said, almost with a smirk. I had to, I replied, because people forget. She stared at me, blinking hard, her jaw tight. I could feel her scrambling beneath the surface, reaching for the old roles, the practice lines, the script where I stayed quiet. But I wasn't quiet anymore. I'm happy to repeat it, I said, resting my hand over the folder. If anyone missed the part where I saved her. Even Bernard looked like he needed a minute. He gently closed the file, then cleared his throat. Perhaps we'll take a short break before continuing. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff from sitting too long. The hem of my dress brushed my calves as I moved, and I tucked the folder under my arm like armor. I didn't look back as I walked toward the hallway. I didn't need to. There's a kind of power in saying what's true, even when no one claps, especially then. Some people confuse silence with grace, but sometimes silence is just unpaid debt, and I was done carrying theirs. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means everyone's too shocked to speak. The only sound was the gentle tap of rain against the wide office windows. The herbal tea carafe on the sideboard had gone lukewarm. No one touched it. I sat with my back straight, my folder closed, my hands resting quietly in my lap. Across the room, Elaine shifted in her seat like her spine had suddenly lost confidence. I didn't mean it like that, she finally said, voice small but laced with an old entitlement. It was stress. I was under pressure. It just came out wrong. She looked around the room for support that didn't come. Mom's words returned to me like a whisper in my memory. Elaine's just delicate. Don't push her too hard. As if fragility had ever stopped her from drawing blood. I didn't respond. I didn't nod or even glance at her. I let her statement drop like a coin into a well, heard but not retrieved. Dad exhaled, a sound more weary than apologetic. It was the first noise he'd made in over an hour. Let's just get through this, he muttered, eyes still fixed on the table. No drama. That had always been his line. No drama. As if pretending made things cleaner. He had mastered the art of distance. Even now, sitting beside Elaine, his eldest daughter, he seemed to be somewhere else entirely, tucked inside a safer thought. Bernard adjusted his chair slightly, shuffling pages back into order. We'll resume then. His voice didn't waver, but it wasn't quite as smooth as before. He listed remaining estate items with the precision of someone reading inventory. The house, 312 Fairview Drive, transfers to Elaine, as stated in the original deed. The Lexus, 2018 gray is designated for Dylan Walker. Financial accounts have already been divided per Corinne Walker's instructions. He paused for half a breath, just long enough to make it sound unintentional. And finally, to Jenna Walker, a personal item requested by the deceased, a brooch, silver, with a mother-of-pearl inlay. My heart didn't drop. I didn't feel rage or humiliation, just confirmation. The brooch. I knew it. The one Mom used to wear to church when I was a child, oval-shaped, chipped on one edge. I had cleaned it once with a Q-tip and Windex after she spilled coffee on her blouse. She told me to put it back where it belonged. Now it belonged to me. Elaine looked straight ahead. Dylan glanced at me, just a flicker, but he didn't say anything. There was something in his face, though, like regret had started to bloom, slow and reluctant. I took in the room one more time. The soft lighting, the gloss of the table, the bouquet of white lilies on the credenza, already starting to curl at the tips. "I'm not here for the house," I said, my voice quiet but certain. "I came to be seen." No one replied. That's the funny thing about being underestimated. You get used to being ignored, but when the silence comes after the truth, it feels different. Not like absence, more like consequence. I didn't wait for Bernard to dismiss us. I gathered my folder, stood, and slid my chair back with deliberate care. The sound it made, a soft scrape against polished wood, felt louder than anything spoken that morning. Elaine stood too, just behind me. Her heels clicked as she closed the space between us. She leaned in, just enough for only me to hear. "You'll always be bitter," she whispered, like she was still trying to win something. I turned slightly, my mouth steady. "And you'll always owe me." It wasn't a threat, just a fact. She blinked, as if unsure whether to be wounded or indignant, but I was already stepping away. You learn a lot when you stop needing the people who once defined you. The room didn't change. The light didn't get softer. But I had, and that was enough. Everyone expects the world to snap back after a revelation, but sometimes it just stays quiet. Monday morning came with low skies and the smell of rain that hadn't arrived yet. The kitchen was warm from the toaster, and I let the bread go a little longer than usual. I liked the crunch. Something about the finality of it felt satisfying, like burning the edges gave the slice more character. I buttered it slowly and sliced 2 boiled eggs. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. The apartment still had the usual clutter, a pile of unopened mail on the windowsill, a laundry basket that hadn't been touched in 3 days. But the weight in my chest had shifted. It hadn't disappeared, just moved. There was a kind of quiet in the air that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I sat by the kitchen window, eating my breakfast in soft bites, watching the neighbor's dog chase leaves along the sidewalk. The dog always wore a red bandana, and the man who walked him whistled the same tune every morning. I'd never asked what song it was. Maybe tomorrow. On the counter, my laptop pulsed with a full battery light. I opened it out of habit, but when the login screen blinked to life, I didn't check my bank account. I didn't scroll through unread emails or skim utility due dates. I just let the screen sit there, quiet and neutral. The phone rang. Dylan. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, curiosity maybe, or forgiveness trying to stretch, made me answer. "Hey," he said. His voice was quiet. "Hi," I replied, not helping him out. I just wanted to say I saw everything and I should have said something in that room. I didn't. I stayed silent. "I was scared," he added. "Not of you, of them. I didn't want to lose the rest of the family, but I lost you instead." He wasn't wrong. "I'm not angry," I finally said. "Not anymore." He let out a breath. "Can I call again sometime?" "Maybe," I said. "Not today." He didn't argue. "Okay, that's fair." After we hung up, I stared at the wall for a long while. There was a stain near the baseboard I hadn't noticed before. Probably coffee, maybe old tea. It didn't matter. Some marks didn't need scrubbing. Just acknowledgement. A soft knock at the door pulled me back. I opened it to find Julian standing there with 2 paper cups in his hands. "I figured you hadn't had real coffee yet," he said. I blinked, unsure how to respond. "I come in peace," he added, lifting the cup slightly like a peace offering. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat on the front step outside my building. The concrete was cold beneath us, and the sky threatened drizzle but hadn't committed. He handed me a cup and sipped his own. "You look better," he said. "I feel quieter," I replied. "That's something." We sat for a minute just watching a car pull slowly around the corner. Then he spoke again. "There's a nonprofit," he said, "small but growing. They're looking for a finance lead, someone who gets what it's like to build from scraps, someone who's lived through the not enough and still showed up anyway." I raised an eyebrow. "They want someone who understands resilience," he continued, "and your name came to mind." I studied his face. There was no pity in his expression, just calm, maybe even admiration. "This isn't charity," he added. "It's earned. You've earned more than they ever gave." I took a slow sip of coffee. It was hot, a little bitter. Perfect. "Why are you here, really?" I asked. "To remind you that the rooms you were excluded from aren't the only ones that matter." We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. Not all conversations require cleanup. When he left, he didn't hug me or linger, just gave a small nod and walked off like someone who knew how to leave things respectfully whole. I went back inside. The kitchen was still warm from the toaster and my empty plate sat in the sink, waiting. But instead of washing it, I opened the laptop again. Not to check my accounts, to start my application. They said I took too much, but all I ever wanted was acknowledgement. And today, I got something better: clarity. The rooftop of the Civic Center was dressed like a wedding reception. White linen tables fluttering under clipped centerpieces, trays of canapes passed gently by staff in black vests, and the scent of warm cider wafting from a polished brass urn near the back. The sun was low but generous, catching the edges of the skyline in gold. Fall leaves danced across the concrete floor, carried by a breeze that felt too soft to be November. I stood near the edge, my speech card folded and unfolding in my hand like a rhythm I hadn't broken yet. My name was on the program, printed correctly this time. Jenna Walker, Strategic Finance Advisor. I stared at it longer than I needed to, not because it was surprising, but because it was whole. Julian stood a few steps behind me, chatting with someone from the board. When he caught my eye, he offered a small smile and a clap. Nothing grand, just enough. He wasn't here to center himself. That part of my life was over. I stepped up to the mic. It wasn't a large audience, maybe 30 or 40 people, donors and partners mostly, but they quieted when I spoke. No one shuffled. No one looked through me. "Sometimes," I said, my voice steady, "the ones who hold things together are invisible until they aren't." A few people nodded. I kept going. "This organization exists because we've all been in rooms where only the loudest got credit. But resilience doesn't shout. It builds quietly. It balances the checkbooks, redos the grant reports, remembers the birthdays, and keeps the lights on even when no one says thank you." I paused and smiled. "So I'm honored to help build something new, something that sees the quiet work, because we're not invisible anymore." Applause followed, not thunderous, but sincere. I stepped back, folded my card, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Someone handed me a cider, and I accepted it without thinking. The heat of the cup against my palm was grounding. It still amazed me how peace could arrive without ceremony. Just a room of new faces, a correct name tag, and no one asking me to apologize for showing up. Later, after most of the guests had trickled out and someone began clearing glasses from the cocktail tables, my phone buzzed. Bernard. I walked toward the far corner of the rooftop, the chill brushing across my collarbone. "Jenna," he greeted, always formal. "Elaine contacted our office this morning. She wants to amend the will." I didn't say anything. "She's considering a more equal distribution," he continued. She asked if you'd be willing to participate in a review process. I looked out at the skyline. The city stretched like a memory made visible. Old brick buildings nestled among new steel outlines, all humming with the slow, ordinary courage of people doing the best they could. I appreciate the call, Bernard, I said, but I already got what I came for. He paused. Understood. We hung up. There were no fireworks, no closing lines worthy of a headline, just the feel of a choice made cleanly, without hesitation. That, too, was new for me. I stayed a little longer while the staff finished packing up. I helped fold a linen or two, toss some napkins into the bin, and exchange names with a young intern who liked my shoes. I didn't tell her where I got them. Some things don't need origin stories. Then I walked home. The evening air had cooled, brushing against my cheeks with a crispness that felt like permission. My coat pocket held the folded speech, a few crumpled napkins, and a business card from a woman who wanted to schedule a meeting next week. Nothing miraculous, but I've never felt lighter. As I walked home with fall leaves at my feet and a business card in my coat pocket, I realized something simple but true. I didn't need their apology. I needed my own permission to move forward. Sometimes, the deepest kind of peace comes not from being forgiven, but from choosing to stop asking for approval that was never yours to chase. Families don't always give us what we deserve, but they do teach us who we are and who we no longer have to be. In life, dignity often arrives quietly once we stop shrinking to fit someone else's story. If this journey reminded you of something in your own life or someone you've quietly supported, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You're welcome to share your reflections or follow along for more stories like this one. We find strength in being seen,